Greetings, Tom Pope here with Glenn Greenwich from Community and Social Change Radio. We're facing some interesting developments after the Chauvin verdict. For those who thought that this was a great success, well, while it is at the moment, we have a lot more to contend with. Dealing with the guilty person is one aspect, but we have an institutionalized problem of the police reacting by forgetting about de-escalation in many cases and instead just using weapons. We have another problem because we have a reaction by many states to curb any amount of protesting. 17 states are now striking out against anyone who is protesting with laws that would make it virtually 15-year sentences for people who are protesting. Florida's new law just passed actually expands the term rioting to include the presence of 3 people in a protest. Part of that law also indemnifies people who use their car to maim or hurt protesters. Even in the case of death, the person driving the car, attacking the protester, will not have to worry about any type of crime. These laws are being thought of in 17 states, or actually it might be more by now. So we have a big task ahead of us. Glenn?
Well, let's talk about the de-escalation, because I think that's one of the biggest issues that we've seen, especially when it comes to minority individuals dealing with the police. The police are shoot first and ask questions later. And when it comes to our community, we've had countless. We had the 13-year-old who actually had his hands up, didn't have a gun, had his hands up, and still got shot in the process. We've got people that are getting pulled over for parking violations and parking tickets and so on and so forth, getting shot. We had the officer in the Army that was pulled over. He waited as been directed to pull into a lit area so that he can come out, and got pepper sprayed for no apparent reason. Now, they said that they pulled him over because he didn't have a tag, although you could see the tag from the body cam. So I'm not sure what they were looking at. So there's a lack of training, and I think that's part of the defund the police force that is getting a bad reputation. It's not about defunding the police. It's about actually having services and providing alternatives to being shot. And I think that defunding is really an opportunity to look at those other areas, the social areas, and the social skills that police are not being taught or don't have the capacity. I mean, think about it.
Well, actually, with a lot of the cases we're talking about, where someone may have a knife and may have an emotional problem, maybe even has a gun, why do we have a policeman there as opposed to a psychological person?
Right.
The idea of, in a hospital setting, where you might have a problem with patients, this is being done all the time, where someone de-escalates the problem by talking, reasoning with the person, or handling it in such a manner where the knife is put away, the gun is put away. The police don't have, you're right, they don't have the training. But beyond that, it shouldn't be their task. This is the task of health professionals. This is not the task of police professionals.
Yeah, and when you look at the training, you know, I question, shoot somebody in the foot. You know, they're not going to be able to come at you. I mean, you know, we look at these situations and they're being shot in the main torso. We're looking at a death target as opposed to maiming, slowing them down. Listen, I don't care what I got in my hand. If I get shot in the foot, I'm now going to pay attention to what's happening with my foot, and whatever I have in my hand is going to be, not, it's not going to matter.
Well, there's a problem with that in terms of the way the police look at this. They think that it's more difficult to actually get the foot, and it's less difficult to get a larger part of the body, which is why they've done this. But the big factor comes before we get to the point of needing to fire a weapon. Other things can be done, and they're not being done.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's really the point that we're pointing to is that there are other ways of dealing with the situation, and all we're doing is getting, shooting first and asking questions afterwards, and it's only for a certain part of the society. It's not, one of the things that people have been talking about is all we're looking for black and brown people is to be dealt with the same way everybody else is dealt with, and that's the issue. That's the institutional piece and part of the training that needs to be part of the police force around the country.
Now, when did there was some type of training years ago. It seems like all of that has been forgotten. When did that change?
I would have to say that it's changed probably in the last 4 or 5 years noticeably. I think the change has been coming prior to that, but there's, as far as I can tell, there is no de-escalation. In fact, when you look at it, some of the police force are actually agitated and are attacking the community. When we look at the case, the verdict that just came by, this gentleman has killed 4 people prior to Floyd, and so you now wonder what happened to all of the investigations. Why was this not part of the trial? You begin to look at the history of bad apples. When you think, I think Chris Rock said it. He says, "You don't have bad apples that are pilots. You get rid of them, because their purpose is to land the plane." And so you don't get an opportunity to have a bad apple as a pilot. And so why are we having all of these bad apples that are allowed to go from one force to the other? So they'll leave one police force and go to another. Now, Corey Johnson just put something in place. I heard this morning saying that he was looking to make sure that if a law enforcement officer was let go or had trouble at a particular another department in another state, another city, that they shouldn't be allowed to move to another department somewhere else. And so they're looking into putting legislation to do that. And I think that will help the situation. But again, we're talking about an institutional approach that needs to be changed.
I think we are also along those lines. We might see a link between people who were in the military, came out of the military and looked for a job and became policemen. Now, if you've been in the military in a very hot spot, you're probably suffering a form of PSTD. Now you're in another hot spot. That PSTD is amplifying itself to a point where you're going to react without thinking of de-escalation. That's a process we have to change.
Absolutely.
I think we can't leave out the urge to have some type of community reaction against these new laws that are being proposed around the country. The idea that it's bad to protest goes against the Constitution. We have the right to protest. Now, if we're going to bar citizens from protesting, if we're going to allow car drivers to kill people, if we're going to say that we're going to put you away because you're a BLM member and you were in a protest, this is becoming a police state to the point where this is operating against the Constitution. One might actually, many people might actually ask the question, if this goes into effect, is this not treason?
Interesting point. Interesting point. You know, the unrest that's been taking place and some of the protesting, I think, has upped the awareness, the consciousness of not only this country, but around the world for racial inequities. And I think it would be a shame to curtail that kind of non-violent protest. And I just want to underline that, because when you look at Black Lives Matter, you see that most of the violence were not part of their group, but there was outsiders that would come in to agitate the situation and make it seem like those protesters were violent and anti-society. And you know, it's not, we're not going in the right direction if we're now limiting protests to a riot to 3 people, and you know, the vehicular homicide is now okay because they were a protester. You know, this is scary. You know, this and the voter restrictions, you know, all of these things are now harming the freedom of our country.
Well, if you like what you've seen, get in touch with us on our Facebook page, Community and Social Change. You'll find us on Facebook.